Turning to the Twitterverse, Elon Musk says Twitter has interfered in elections. Very interesting. Just a few days ago, I also spoke with Google engineer turned whistleblower Zach Voorhees. He said the same thing. Google has been interfering in elections and has been trying to move the Overton window over to the left. In fact, he says this is so dangerous it represents a threat to our republic. He also said all the tech companies, including Google, are filled with communist Chinese spies. Very, very interesting stuff. Elon Musk has also said he was going to be posting details on Twitter soon about the company's war on free speech. It's going to be very, very interesting. Meanwhile, the EU is threatening to ban Twitter if it doesn't go back to silencing people who expose the narrative. Our first guest today actually is one of the people who were silenced on Twitter for speaking the truth. So we'll ask him a little bit about that. Meanwhile, massive layoff. Turning to Brazil, radical left-wing Supreme Court Judge Alexandre de Moraes wants to fine the Liberal Party of Jair Bolsonaro $4.1 million. That's 22 million reais. Freeze their bank accounts as they investigate the party and the party's chairman because this political party filed a complaint about massive election fraud in Brazil with the electoral court. Can you imagine that? You complain about election fraud, they freeze your assets and target you for potential prosecution. I lived many years in Brazil. I almost consider it a second home. So this is something that strikes very close to home. And folks, what's happening here is hugely significant. I spoke with Congressman Eduardo Bolsonaro, the son of Jair Bolsonaro, some months ago, and he told me they were planning this. He told me they were planning to arrest people who pointed out the fraud, and that turns out to be exactly what's happening. The Liberal Party, in their complaint at the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, said, what we seek to demonstrate with this empirical result from the electronic voting machines of the 2020 model, uniformly distributed throughout the country by the Electoral Court itself, based on valid audit elements that attest to the authenticity of the electoral result with the necessary certainty as mandated by the Supreme Electoral Court itself, is that the valid and auditable votes of the second round of the 2022 electoral process attest to a different result from that announced by the Superior Electoral Court on 10/30/2022, conferring a percentage of 51.5% of the vote to President Jair Bolsonaro. That's according to the official complaint. That's what they're being fined for. Now, the armed forces are being begged by millions of people in Brazil to intervene in this. The Constitution actually has a provision on that that deals with that. We mentioned that a few weeks ago. A military report that was filed actually says that they found evidence of access to the network during the compilation of the source code that could represent, and I'm quoting here again from the military report, a major risk to the security of the process. This report was submitted by the Minister of Defense in Brazil, General Paulo Sergio Nogueira, and he concluded that it is not possible to affirm that the electronic voting system is free from the influence of malicious code that could alter its operations. General Nogueira asked for a technical investigation, and so in response, Alexandre de Moraes of the Supreme Electoral Court is now demanding that this man be removed from his post at the head of the Brazilian military. So very, very interesting. You're not hearing anything about this in the media in the United States, and I think there's a very important reason why. What you are hearing about a lot in the American media is the growing protests in communist China against the totalitarian COVID policies of dictator Xi Jinping. Those policies are continuing. They have sent the police in now to quell the unrest. I want to show you some recent video that just came out of Guangzhou in China in the Haizhu district. Look at this. All right, this truly is unprecedented, folks, in China. The last time people got this rowdy, they mowed them over with tanks and machine guns in the Tiananmen Square massacre. So I don't know exactly what's going on yet. We will definitely keep you updated, working with some sources in China to try to get a better handle of what's happening. But something is fishy. And I don't know what it is yet, but something is very fishy. Klaus Schwab, the head of the World Economic Forum, just recently said, while I was in Egypt at the UN Climate Summit, he came out and said in Indonesia that Communist China, he actually said this to Communist Chinese television, Communist China should be the model for many countries. And you know, at the climate summit in Egypt, I asked everybody I could find, you know, you're talking about CO2 emissions. China emits 3 times more CO2 emissions than the United States. They're building coal-fired power plants. They're building more in the next couple of years than our entire fleet fleet of coal-fired power plants in the United States. Why are we not talking about this? Well, here's Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum giving a little bit of insight into this question.
On the G20, you were there meeting some of the leaders as well. Professor Schwab, what do you make of the result? Finally, they put something as a statement, and it seems quite positive with all the voices included.
I think it's positive. It's already positive through the fact that everybody agreed about the statement, which we haven't had the last years. Now the base has been formed, but we have to go one step further. We have to have a strategic mood. We have to construct the world of tomorrow. It's a systemic transformation of the world. So we have to define how the world should look like, which we want to come out of this transformation period. I respect China's achievements, which are tremendous over the last over 40 years. I think it's a role model for many countries, but I think also we should leave it to each country to make its own decision what system it wants to adopt. And I think we should be very careful in imposing systems. But the Chinese model is certainly a very attractive model for quite a number of countries.
Yeah, the Chinese model is very attractive. Literally, no government in all of human history has murdered as many people as this Chinese model. How somebody could say that with a straight face is beyond me. All right, folks, we are going